When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Oldish Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. Greg and I are so happy to have our good friend back, Leslie Ross-Degnan, as we discuss our latest book with the theme of oldishness. The book is How the Penguins Saved Veronica by Hazel Prior. Before we jump in, I just wanted to take a moment to, I think, represent the three of us in saying our profound sadness and grief and concern about the state of our world. Specifically, in the last couple of days, a shooting at Brown University. We don't even know the cause or the reason or the motivation. We don't know who the killer was. But it's just so hard to picture those students sitting in that classroom and suddenly having someone walk in and start shooting. And then it was either the next day or the day after that, there was a shooting at Bonsai Beach in Australia. Here it was clear a group of Jewish families and gathering to celebrate the beginning of Hanukkah. So that was a pretty clear motivation, but so incredibly sad. And here a country that has the lowest number of guns and the very strong gun violence prevention laws. And then today to wake up and hear that Rob Reiner and his wife had been stabbed to death in their beds, and with the possible perpetrator being their son, who had struggled with mental illness for a number of years. So, and I know there's so many shootings and killings that have happened in the past few days that we don't even know about. So I guess I'm just adding our caring and concern to the universe and our holding of all that were involved and are involved. I think about that it's the holidays, and here are family members of students at Brown, and here are family members celebrating the holidays, and here are Rob Reiner and his wife suffering the result of mental illness, which is so often not treated effectively in our country. So with that said, it's great to be able to move into a book that is full of joy and hope for what it means to be oldish. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks for that mention. I think it's important. Okay, so as Janet said, our story is How the Penguins Saved Veronica by Hazel Prior. And you'd think with a name like Hazel that she'd be old. I mean, that's an old-fashioned name, in my mind anyway, Hazel. But this woman, Hazel Prior, is really only about 57 years old. She's the British author of How the Penguins Saved Veronica. And an interesting thing about this book, and I'm not sure why, in England, the title of the same book is called Away with Penguins. That's got to be like a publisher issue or something like that, the publisher didn't like the title Away with Penguins and wanted to distinguish the American version of it for marketing, I guess, and called it How the Penguins Saved Veronica. So let's talk a little bit about Hazel Prior. She was born in Oxford, but she lived all over the UK in like Devon, Dorset, Bath, Wales, even Wales and Scotland. And she currently lives in Exmoor with her husband and their ginger cat. It seems a lot of these British authors have cats. She's written 5 novels altogether. This book is part of a trilogy of Penguin books. Now, I didn't know it was part of a trilogy when I first read it until I looked up some of this information. She wrote 2 more after this one because this first one was so well received. How the Penguins Saved Veronica was followed by her second penguin book called Call of the Penguin, which was written in 2021, and with more Veronica and more penguins. And the final book of the trilogy is titled Gone with the Penguins, which she wrote in 2024. And it was interesting to discover that Hazel Prior had never been to Antarctica before she wrote this novel, which is set in Antarctica. But she loved the idea of the setting for a novel, which I think is an interesting reason to put it in her book. She had to do a lot of research on both the setting about the Antarctic setting and on penguins, because she'd only ever seen penguins in captivity, which I also find interesting. I thought, wow, that's a big leap of faith. Yeah, because she really brought you there. She brought you there to where the penguins lived. The setting was just so important to the novel, and the penguins were just so important in their behavior. These, by the way, were Adelie penguins. There are lots of different kinds of penguins, but the penguins in this story are Adelie penguins. So after the success of her first 2 penguin novels, she visited penguins in the Falklands, and she started a blog after this trip, which you could check out on her blog, on her website, which is Hazel Prior, all one word, .co.uk. And her blog is very easy to navigate. To see it, just click under one of the headings that says more, and you'll have a drop-down menu, but you'll be able to figure that out. And then the blog will be in that drop-down menu. But besides the penguin novels, Prior's written 2 other novels. Her debut was called Ellie and the Harp Maker, which she wrote in 2019. It's a love story about a young woman named Ellie and Dan, a man who obsessively makes harps. And incidentally, Hazel Prior is a harpist. She plays the Celtic harp. And you can hear her play online if you're interested. I actually looked at it. Just Google Hazel Prior playing the harp, and several videos will come up. And if you browse around, you'll find a video of her doing a reading from How the Penguins Saved Veronica, while she accompanies herself on her harp. It's really worth looking for that. It's really lovely. Her first novel was followed by the very successful Penguin trilogy, which we're talking about now. And her most recent novel is called Life and Otter, O-T-T-E-R, Miracles. Life and Otter Miracles, which she wrote in 2025. And it's about how the discovery of an abandoned baby otter leads to finding out that there's something amiss in the otter sanctuary. Sounds like a mystery to me, so it'd be worth checking that out too if you like this book. So she's a very interesting person, but let's get back to the discussion of her book, How the Penguins Saved Veronica. So I'm just going to give a brief synopsis, and feel free to add to it when I'm done, and then we'll talk about the book. Veronica McCready is a wealthy 85-year-old, octogenarian. She lives alone in her mansion by the Scottish Sea. She doesn't have any children or family that she knows of at the time, and she's looking for a worthwhile cause to leave her sizable fortune. She's been watching a documentary about penguins and decides to leave her legacy to the Penguin Research Project in the Antarctica. But first, she insists on visiting the project, in spite of protests from the research team. This very feisty and independent old woman travels to Antarctica on her own to see the penguins and meet the team of scientists who are studying them. And as the story unfolds, we learn more about Veronica's difficult past in flashbacks and, exactly why she's such an unhappy person. Of course, the penguins eventually work their magic on softening her heart and forever changing Veronica. I suppose penguins have a way of doing that. I've never met one personally.
I haven't either. But it makes me want to.
Makes me want to. I think we should all take a trip to the...
Yes. Yeah, I think we should. We could record from there. Our in-the-moment experiences.
They have really cute rock hoppers. They're actually her favorite penguin of all the penguins. She likes the rock hoppers best. So they have them at the aquarium in Boston. So we should definitely do a field trip.
Well, that might be a good idea. When I was reading all about the Penguins and seeing the Penguins work their magic on the various characters who had life stuff going on, and they weren't all chipper. All the people in the book weren't all chipper. And I was actually starting to think that the Penguins were posing a challenge to Janet's profession.
Yeah, you don't need therapy. Just go and see the Penguins.
That's right.
Or I need to bring
Yes.
penguins into my office.
Yeah, there you go.
Like
It's
Mr.
actually a pretty
Popper.
good idea.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, Greg. So I just want to say something. I have this thing about first lines of a novel. I don't know if anybody else pays a lot of attention to them, but I do pay attention to first lines, and I was intrigued by these first lines. First lines should hook you in a way that's relevant to the story, I think. Or they set a tone and give a voice to some character, some important character. But they should also make you curious to read on. And I think the first lines speak volumes about Veronica and about oldishness. And here are the first lines of this novel. I have told Eileen to get rid of all the mirrors. I used to like them, but I certainly don't now. Mirrors are too honest. There is only so much truth a woman can take.
It certainly caught me. It certainly caught my interest.
So, any other comments? Because I wonder, is she talking about the mirrors really or something else?
Well, I think she's talking about something else. But it put me in mind, when I read that, it put me in mind of something that our old friend Pema Chodron says in one of her talks, in which she talks about people as they get older get so that they don't like mirrors. And there's the Aerosmith song where every time I look in the mirror, all the lines in my face getting clearer. And what Pema says is that she's not afraid of mirrors, but once in a while she'll walk by a mirror and look over the reflection and she'll say, who is that? This put me in mind of that a little bit.
Yeah, either that or you look in the mirror and you say, oh my God, it's my mother or my father or my grandmother.
And that might feel good or not good or, or scary.
Right.
Yeah, I don't like that. It happens to me a lot. My father and I look very much alike. He's passed away now, but people used to stop us on the street to say how much we looked alike. And despite the fact that I was over a foot taller than he was.
Wow.
And every time people would do that, I would say, one of us is insulted by that.
So I wonder if mirrors is an opportunity in our oldishness to make peace with some things we might not have thought about up till then. So if you look in the mirror and suddenly you see you look just like your father, or you look in the mirror and you see you look just like whoever. And if you haven't had a chance or haven't found a way to make peace with that, it's like, here's this chance as we're getting old. Like, okay, all right, okay. I've got to figure this out. I've got to make peace with it because it's me too. So if I've hated that image of my father, but now I'm looking like my father, and I don't want to hate myself, then I have to make some peace with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that line when she says mirrors are too honest. I mean, they just reflect what they see, but you don't necessarily see the same thing. If it's reflecting your mother or your father, it's creating a whole lot of emotions, possibly. Yes. And the fact that there's only so much truth that a woman can take. It's not just about your reflection in the mirror, but it's about your history in some ways, It's certainly in this book.
Yeah, that was a really big foreshadowing of her.
And it's interesting how, I think we were touching on this, that she wasn't a happy person. She had gotten to a place at this point, after years, we learn over time what her history is, and that she had just come to a place of accepting, this is what happened, this is my life, I'm alone, I'm lonely, but I've got this beautiful place to walk around, and that's my life. And so then to be able to jump into a challenge, an adventure, is very exciting. One thing I loved her writing, like you were saying, Leslie, I loved the way she described the environment around her, what the characters were seeing. I loved how she described getting old. And here's a couple sentences where she wrote, I would even classify myself as sprightly. I am aware that this body cannot be wholly relied upon. In the past, it was a faultless machine. But over the years, it has suffered losses in both elasticity and efficiency. I must be prepared for the fact that it might let me down at some point in the near future. I thought, okay, spot on. You got that, what I'm feeling.
Yeah, that could have been a first line.
Mhm.
Similar to the mirror. But true, she was physically fit and she did walk on the beach and did her gardening and, did lots of things that many other older people really are not able to do. But on the other hand, emotionally, she was very much alone and not so healthy, I don't think.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's interesting that one of the primary metaphors of the book is her treasure chest that she has locked away in a storeroom hidden under the dust, to the point where the lock on it is rusted, although she unlocks it fairly handily because she remembers the code. And she starts to change when she opens up this box that she had put around her heart. That's when she starts to change. And that's when she says, I got to go do something before it's too late. If I don't do it now, when am I going to do it?
I think that's true. Yeah.
And her first bequest to her grandson is that chest. And she doesn't like him at first, but she's going off on this adventure and she sends him the chest and the code.
She doesn't send him the code right away, though. She sends him the box, right?
Yeah.
And then he just puts it away. I thought that was interesting because his behavior reflected hers. She had that box buried and she gives it to him and he can't open it. So he just puts it away and kind of forgets about it. But then later when she sees fit, when she decides she's so fiercely independent, kind of mean, actually, she decides, okay, I'm going to give him the code to open this box now. And that's when their relationship begins too, when he begins to uncover her past and finally understands something about how he's her grandson and who his father was and her difficult life. Yeah.
It's a great metaphor. Open up the box you've kept your heart boxed up in and let other people see into it. And that's when you'll find love.
I love that Greg, you were talking about it being this metaphor. The fact that she started the process of an adventure, of considering an adventure, of looking at the penguins on TV and starting to have this idea she could actually go see them. And then her grandson popping up, she didn't even know that he still existed because she had to give him up for adoption, or he was actually kind of taken away from her when he was pretty young. So then, giving him that box through her housekeeper. She had left, and then she told the housekeeper to give it to him, I think, but no code. So it was almost like these steps, because that was her life, that the treasure chest. It was her story, her everything, which she hadn't shared with anybody. So taking those steps, she sent it to him, which was acknowledging, okay, you are my grandson. I don't know what to do with that yet, but I'm processing that. And then deciding, okay, I think I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to open myself up completely, like you were both saying. And then that started this huge growth process.
Yeah, it all happened in that first sentence. In the first sentence of the book, it all happened there because she said to her housekeeper, put these mirrors away. She said, I don't want to have these mirrors. Put them all away. And the housekeeper put them away in the storeroom. And she came out of the storeroom with this box and said, hey, what's this? And Veronica had, if I remember it right, she did not remember the box until she saw it again. She had put it away and intended to never see it again. And her housekeeper brought it out. And she said the next day, she said, put the mirrors back up. Why aren't the mirrors there anymore? And the housekeeper said, well, you told me to put them down. And now I'm thinking like, oh, here we go. She's forgetful. She's already demented, but the metaphor had taken over by that point. And she put the mirrors back up so she could see herself. And she opened up the box. And she used the mirror to remind herself that she wanted to go and look at the penguins.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That is interesting.
This whole healing the past theme is one of Patrick's too. He has his own past hurts and losses to heal from. And that all comes out after he reads about hers. I mean, he was raised by a single mom, and his father, who is Veronica's son, it seemed like his father had been trying to end his own life for a long time with his risky lifestyle of mountain climbing. And I'm wondering about the symbolism of that. He had very risky behavior, his father. Patrick seems different, which is good. That was kind of at the beginning of the novel when a lot of that came out. And at that point, I was thinking, she probably did this on purpose. Maybe there's hope for the relationship. Maybe there's hope that both of them are going to heal and get around to it, which they eventually do. But I loved that it was kind of foreshadowed in the beginning through that box. It was really interesting.
Yeah, Greg, you provided a deepening for me around the mirror, her telling her housekeeper to take it down, and then the next day saying, why is it down? I looked at it purely from that first level of she is forgetful. And I love that they put that in there, and that as the readers were worrying, oh, how forgetful is she and what's going to happen next? And she's okay. And she's such a fierce, independent 85-year-old that she's like, she says something about, I'm not forgetful. I remember everything. And she goes, except for the times when I sometimes don't, but I liked that. But then this deeper message of it was almost too late, though I do believe with life there's hope. But she was at this point of just take the mirrors down. But then she saw the treasure chest. Oh, put the mirrors back up.
Well, the other thing that's kind of symbolic of the box is the locket where she has the hair of her lover, the hair of her parents, the hair of her child as a baby. And she rarely opens it because it's so painful. Or she thinks about it more than opening it, but it's just another sort of thing that she doesn't want to face. Yeah. But eventually, over time, she does.
And maybe that's one of the themes of the book and themes of oldishness is having the courage to look at things at our age that help us understand more about ourselves and our lives, but take courage.
Absolutely. I know memory is often very painful, and you can't sometimes go forward till you go backwards, which was the case for her. Mm-hmm. Which makes me think about this, her whole reason to thinking about legacy. Like most people, she starts to think about what she wants to do with her fortune. She knows she's fit. She knows she's going to be around a while, but she doesn't know how long. And she wants to leave it to somebody, but she doesn't have any family. So she ends up leaving behind something more than money when she visits the Penguin Project and she meets her grandson again. I wanted to talk a little bit about the first meeting with her grandson and what a disaster it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and I kept trying to see it through both lenses, but I felt like I just was leaning more towards looking at through Patrick's lens, where like out of the blue, this old lady sends a snail mail saying, well, I'm your grandmother and I want to meet you. And in the meantime, his life's falling apart, right? He broke up with his girlfriend. He only works one day a week. He can't afford the apartment that he's sharing with her. And so he's living in this bed sitter and feeling depressed, and he's smoking pot. And he's just a mess. And then to make it worse, she comes early. He thinks, oh, I'll make a nice cake. She's an old lady. He has all these good intentions, which tells you a lot about his personality. But at this point in his life, emotionally, he's a mess. And those good intentions are not going to happen. And they don't. And when she comes, it's just a complete disaster.
Well, I'm thinking so many things are going through my head, like the importance of grandparents, that he was portrayed as just being pretty ungrounded and not having an anchor, and how much of that was from not knowing his father and not knowing his story, not knowing his history. And then this woman comes along and says, I'm your grandmother. And he was both wanting that to be great and wanting to bake that cake for her. And then also just because she was so, I don't know if disgusted is the best word, but she was so not happy with who this kid was that was supposed to be her grandson. So it certainly was a very bumpy beginning.
It really was. And he doesn't know anything about her wealth or anything like that until later. And then when he calls her to apologize, which I thought was really good character development, she just thinks he's after her money, and she's just not going to change her mind because she's such a stubborn old lady. Even in Antarctica, it's a shaky beginning until Patrick begins to really appreciate this woman, Terry. In fact, he starts to fall in love with her, and he falls in love with the penguins. And then Veronica begins to see that they might have more in common than she thought.
Yeah.
So that was lovely. But
yes. You know, it's funny. I was just like this morning, it was so cold, and I'm feeling so much more fragile as I get older around the cold. And now we're sitting here talking about Veronica going to Antarctica wandering around, looking at the penguin group colony. And I'm just sitting here right now thinking, wow, she was 85 and she went out there and did that. And this is brave and courageous and adventurous, and really modeling life can be adventurous in whatever capacity we can do that for the duration.
I know it was a transformative adventure, because not just for her, but the whole staff and for Patrick, and it's very risky.
It's very risky. She was brave and went off and did this thing, but she carried her stuffy old self with her. And the first opportunity for her real awakening, and the first time that the penguins tried to save her, was the first time she went out with one of the other people at the research station. And she went out dressed up like Queen Elizabeth, and she carried a purse. And the first thing that happened when she met the penguins was one of them attacked her purse and tore the purse all up. And so that was like shredding that part of her wasn't going to work in Antarctica. That facade of the fussy old lady with her, she brought 3 purses with her to Antarctica. So, and that wasn't going to work. You can't have that facade of the fussy old lady. You're going to have to start being who you are, because the penguins are going to insist on it. And that's great. So the penguins quite literally saved her, first of all, by attacking her, and then by befriending her. And they saved everybody. They saved the grandson. They'd already saved the researchers. I thought that scene with her going for a walk with her cane and her pocketbook to see the penguins, I thought that was hilarious. But that was the first time that she got opened up by the penguins.
I mean, it's on the cover of the book.
Oh, it's right on the cover of the book. You know, I've looked at that over and over again, and that didn't connect with me until just now, that it's right there.
The cover has a picture of this ugly, bright pink purse on top of a hill of snow with all the penguins around it.
So I'll be damned, I was right. That's the first time today.
Absolutely,
that was pretty good.
Well, yeah, and she brought her Darjeeling tea. I think this is so typically English. She brought some of her little comforts with her on this trip. And really, she hoarded them. She didn't share them at first with everybody. It took her a while to become part of the group on both sides. I mean, They didn't want her to come in the beginning, and I could see why. They were busy. They had to work. They couldn't take care of this 85-year-old woman. Yes. And then she intentionally missed her first boat back, and she had to stay, right? Well, everybody made the best of it. And in the long run, obviously, there wouldn't have been a story if that hadn't happened, but it turned out to be good for everybody, because there was another guy on the expedition team who was kind of like her, real curmudgeonly, made everybody know that he didn't like this and he didn't like that, and he wasn't going to do this and he wasn't going to do that. And he made everything kind of difficult. But Terry, she was like, I don't know, she was the empath of the group. She was so compassionate, so kind, so open, and she was the only one really able to have a relationship with Veronica in the beginning. That was interesting.
And I feel like one of the themes that came along through the book was her evolution from the life she had come to expect, depend on, even including don't keep doors open. And we could talk about what did that symbolize. But the fact she was adamant, whether it was her housekeeper, she couldn't stand it if the housekeeper went from one room to the other without shutting the door, and she would comment on it over and over. And then going to the penguin research station, and at first being very upset when they weren't closing the doors. And then as she grew and opened up in such a deep way, and as the story progresses and she ends up with a very special baby penguin that she connects with, then she has to leave the door open so that the penguin can walk in and out between rooms. And all of a sudden she realizes that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
What do you think that was about? Yeah.
It was a funny quirk. I think it was more symbolic than actual. She just couldn't stand to have open doors inside the space that she was in. It wasn't close the door to the outside, because obviously in Antarctica, people are closing the outside door. She couldn't stand to have the inside doors open either. So as a symbol of her need to be enclosed and kept compartmentalized, it played an important thing. And again, the penguin opened that. She wanted to see the penguin more than she wanted to have the door closed.
Yeah, and then of course when she found the abandoned baby penguin and brought it back to the station, they had to keep the doors open, closed for the baby, and that was interesting. So that was that baby penguin, like a lot of babies are, just really kind of joined everybody, because even though they didn't want her, the team didn't want her to have that baby penguin because they felt it was unnatural. And Hazel Prior writes a lot about the environment and letting nature take its course and that sort of thing. It's a pretty major theme for other novels. So I thought it was the way they brought that in to this part with the baby was interesting, because the team was really against her intervening. But then they realized she's here a short time and this penguin probably isn't going to live very long. And maybe she isn't either. So they decided, let's just let this be. Let's not make a big issue of it and let her take care of it. And it changed them all, just having that penguin around in unexpected ways.
And I feel like possibly that little baby penguin that was out there looked like it was going to perish. And when she brought the penguin home, and she made such a statement to the other scientists, we're going to do this. We're going to bring this baby penguin inside. We're going to try to see if we can nurture it back to life. I wondered if that was in any part a reenactment for her of her having her baby. And
Hadn't thought of that.
yeah, and just being able to do that nurturing and kind of live that. And that was when she first started opening up to Terry. And she started suddenly telling some of her story to Terry.
The other part about that is that it made them more of a family. And I think that having this baby there, everybody had to pitch in and do something to nurture this baby penguin. So it really did connect them in ways that they weren't connected before. And it said a lot about, Veronica was lonely. She didn't have family. But of course, that just made her, all that stuff that happened in her past just made her push people away because it was just so painful and hurtful for her. But Terry and the team were her first experience with family. And then when she got sick and she went out on her own, which was unbelievable, but that would be so typical of her personality, right? First, they were stuck on the station from a big blizzard, and they told her it's dangerous. She could die of hypothermia. And then she decided she wanted to go out, and nobody could take her. And she, of course, independently went out on her own and almost died of hypothermia and pneumonia. And then they all pitched in and took care of her, including the penguin, including the team. And that's when Patrick came to help out. And that's what families do. This is the thing that families do. So she was able, for the first time in her life, to experience family, the importance of family, that it wasn't just blood, that it was belonging somewhere. It was that sense of belonging, which she felt. And it was pretty.
That's a really good
amazing
point. Did either of you feel in that moment like she was in a way ready to die, that she went off by herself in that way, kind of like discouraged and I don't really care what happens to me at this point? I don't know. That crossed my mind.
Well, yeah, I think, she wasn't stupid. So she had to know that what she was doing wasn't just impulsive and something that she was going to insist on. She had to know she was walking out into a storm. She had seen the storms there before. That was clear. There was a whole storm scene 75 pages prior to that, where there was no reason for that storm scene other than to let us know that she knew what a storm was. So she knew what the issues were there. And, there was it was like, okay, I'm going to walk out here and it'll be the end of it.
Yeah, I didn't get that feeling. No, for me, it just was her stubbornness. It just sort of magnified her stubbornness. It's like, well, I want to go out and see the penguins, but there's nobody here to take me, so I'm just going to go. It didn't even occur to me that she might have been, do you think she might have been suicidal or ready to end her life?
I wondered that.
There's that old tradition, or I don't know if it's a tradition or not, but I grew up hearing about in some northern indigenous tribes, the old people, when it was time, would walk out onto the ice.
Right, yeah, right.
Because they didn't want to be a drag on the tribe or whatever it was. And who knows whether that was ever true, but it seemed a little bit like that to me.
Yeah, you're right. It did. I hadn't thought of it.
And what happened to her out there, though, was that there was a kind of transformation in that for the first time in her whole life since her parents even when her parents died, she didn't cry because her aunt told her be strong, you can't cry. So she had gone through the rest of her life suffering all of these terrible things and never once let herself cry. And she walked out into the midst of the penguins and started to cry. And earlier in the book, somebody had said to her, "Why don't you cry about this?" And she said, "Because if I start, I'll never stop." So she walked out into the midst of the penguins and started to cry.
Well, I think that's part of it, I think, is because she allowed herself to be vulnerable for the first time ever. She's always so uptight, always so in control. Shut those doors. I have to have a control of my environment. But when she got out there, she did allow the penguins to just get into her heart, and open her up. And for me, I saw that as a real epiphany when she went out there and allowed herself to cry about everything, her past, her present, her inability to care and love and be loved by others. To me, it was like a turning point.
Yeah.
I agree. It's almost, and I don't know what you thought of this, both of you, but then when that happened and she got caught in the storm and they came out and found her and brought her in and she was really sick, like, on death's door for a while, and then came back to her life and her healing. I wondered if that was like a transformation too, that it was like this moment where almost like rebirth, Are you ready to be done? And she, almost like she wasn't sure. Then it's like the penguins sitting near her, the people are near her, her grandson is with her, that she finally, it almost felt like chooses, okay, all right, I'm in. What is this life going to show me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because the baby penguin told her to. Because it was almost like in the movie, it would be a little cartoon segment where the baby penguin jumped up on her chest and said, "Hey, wake up. What are you doing? Come on out here." So the penguin, I started thinking that the book was a fantasy at that point. It was a part of the fantasy genre which helped me to actually to appreciate it more, because most of the way through it, I'm like, who are these people? What's going on here anyway? But then the talking penguin solidified for me that there needed to be some magic in it. And there was some magic there. And the baby penguin went down into Hades and grabbed her by the hand and said, "Come on back out."
When she was like delusional in a fever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was an important part of her transformation. Yes. And it sort of unlocked that locket that she kept so tightly locked in her life, to open her up to love and family and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about the end where all through this, the goal for her has been to go down, meet these people, make sure they're legit, and then leave her wealth to them when she dies. And now she's getting to know her grandson, and there's all this wondering with the research center what she'll do. And I think at the end, it seems like she's deciding she's going to give the money to him, and then he can decide if he wants to give some of that to the research center. And I wondered what that meant, or what that might have symbolized.
Well, she had control there too, I think. I think that she was going to give all the money to the Penguin Research Project. And then when Patrick came and they had finally a second chance, which was wonderful, to make amends, was actually a third chance, because the first visit was, disastrous. The second visit was much better. And the third visit, when she was in the Antarctic with the team and Patrick, it was the last chance to make amends. And she does it and Patrick all along had said he didn't really mind that she did that. He didn't know her. It was her choice to give her money to whoever. He wasn't a person, she misunderstood him. He wasn't a person that really cared about money. He cared more about connection and people and his friends and all of that. And she wasn't like that. But then she saw it when he came, and he connected with Terry, and he connected with the penguins, and she saw that he was a kind person. And then she paid for him to stay, which she had to go home because she had to see a doctor and get better. And she was nurturing this relationship between him and Terry. She wanted them to connect. And so she paid for him to stay, and that worked out well because he cooked, and nobody else could seem to cook very well. But he cooked, and he took care of everybody and fed everybody. And then I loved the ending when she trusted him. She said, "Okay, I'm going to give it to him because I know I'll give what needs to be given to the project because he's invested in it. I think she orchestrated that. She made him more invested in it by paying for him to stay and then gave him the money. And then, of course, him being who he is and in love with this woman, Terry, who was never going to leave those penguins, you have to assume in a way that he gave some of the money or a lot of the money to the project.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved the ending because when she came back to England, she gets back home, and after she's given him money to stay, for the project, she's different. She seems, because she had this connection with the family, she seems more in need of connection. And so what does she do? She invites his good friend Gavin and Gavin's family, who she, I think, met once, and she knows this child is sick, right?
Yes.
She just opens her heart up, invites this family into her home. She and Eileen make a nice dinner for them, and they become part of her family too. And I just thought, well, wow, that's very full circle,
Yes, absolutely.
I love the ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to read a couple sentences that show I included it because it showed her writing, the beautiful descriptions. She wrote, glittering streams of meltwater in Antarctica ribbon through the rocks. The lower slopes are startlingly colorful. They are lit up with lichens in lime green, yellows, pink, and a fiery orange. And that's just one small part of this beautifully written, beautiful descriptions in the book.
Good writing, good story, good oldish themes, good life lessons, good humor,
Character
good
development, yes.
good penguins. So what's not to like about this book? I didn't find anything not to like about this book.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree too.
Well, that's great.
So, and what I like most
ending.
about this book, that once again, I wasn't going to read this book. I read it because we were reading this book, and our conversation about it has really helped me to get the book a lot better than I had. I thought I got it pretty well, but talking with you two once again, I've learned a lot about what was in the book and how to go about thinking about the book and how it relates to my penguinless life. And
Got to do that field trip.
I know.
I'm in. I'd go in a heartbeat. If somebody said, let's go, I'm going.
Yes.
Let us know when you're in town and we'll arrange it.
But I agree, Greg. I've learned more and have grown in the depth of what was written and the symbolism by talking together about it.
Good story.
Good story.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, so many oldish truths there that people do tend to shut themselves off from the world. And that's the last thing you want to do. I mean, what you want to do is have friends and connections and community. It really just encourages or just solidifies that message, which is a good message as you get older. Don't shut those doors. Keep those doors open.
Keep the doors open. And once again, we've seen this in several books that we've talked about, and I don't think we did this on purpose, but in several books that we've talked about, one of the themes of the book has been the joining of the biological family with the chosen family. We talked about it last time when we were talking about the Thursday Murder Club, and we saw it also in The Woman Who Met Herself, where the author blended the biological family with the chosen family so that there was a much bigger family than either one would have been. And I like that. I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. So there's a theme there for many of us of joining with family, sometimes discovering new families, sometimes, like we were saying at the beginning about the mirror and what it says about us, and seeing some of our family in the mirror. What does that mean for joining, making peace, reconnecting? So I think those are themes of oldishness. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you to Leslie for participating in this, joining us. It made for a very rich discussion.
Well, it was my pleasure as always. We all enrich the discussion.
Yes. And Greg, did you have an announcement about the next book that we're going to be looking at together?
Yeah. The next book that we're going to read is called The Ride of Her Life by Elizabeth Letts, which a friend of mine told me about. I haven't read it yet. And it's apparently about a woman from Maine who in her 60s rode her horse across the country. She rode from Maine to California with her horse and her dog. And I think it's very exciting to think about that. And it reminds me of one of the first books that we read was Grandma Gates' Long Walk, and about a woman in her 60s who was the first woman to walk the Appalachian Trail. So I assume that there will be some similarities. It's the same time frame, and it was in the early 50s. So I think that'll give us a good look at how life looked to oldish people back when we were kids.
You know, it also reminds me of Travels with Charlie. So it's kind of a cross between Travels with Charlie and Grandma Gatewood.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
that's true. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a journey. It's a physical journey. So I suppose we can expect a lot of transformation to go on there.
Yes.
You would think. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to transform into saying goodbye for today, folks. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful opportunity to hang out with two of my dearest friends and do one of the things that I like to do most, which is to read and talk about books, apparently.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody. It was a pleasure.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening.
As usual, we had a great time reading and discussing this book. It's amazing how much more I get out of a book when I know I'll be reading and talking about it with the Oldish Book Club. We hope you feel the same, and will join us for our next book, The Ride of Her Life by Elizabeth Letts. In our next episode, we'll be talking with Dr. Michael Guadagnino about his book, Fitness Over 50, 60, 70, and Beyond, and how it feels to be oldish and fit. Jack LaLanne is in it. Happy New Year, and don't forget to love everybody. You can leave comments or requests for topics or guests on this or other episodes at www.oldish.me. There's a link there, too, if you've wondered how you can help support our podcast. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're going to call this Hanging on the One. Hanging